So we live in an era of photographic abundance. So like right now, I can pick up a modern mirrorless camera, set it to 20 frames a second, turn on intelligent tracking, and let the machine do the heavy lifting. The technology is practically flawless. But you know, if we're honest with ourselves, when that friction disappears, sometimes the joy goes with it. When a camera captures everything automatically, it's really easy to feel less like a photographer and more like just a data collector. So today, I want to talk about why I intentionally slow down when I'm photographing, and how I'm bringing my film experience into the modern discipline of digital photography. And you know, this may be the very thing that saves your creative sanity. If you spend more than 5 minutes on YouTube, you're going to hear a lot of specs, camera specs, you know, how many megapixel it has and how many stops of dynamic range the camera has, or, you know, what type of lens and what the stop is on it, and, you know, how fast it is in low light, and whether you have enough bokeh in your images. And, you know, that can create an anxiety that if you don't have the latest gear or the latest lens, maybe you're missing out. But what the specs won't teach you is how to see light. See, I grew up around film, and when you have 24 or 36 exposures on a roll, and that's it. Every time you do that, every time you pull that shutter, there's a financial cost involved. You're spending money every time you hit that click, and you're also spending the potential of a missed shot later because you're out of film. So there's kind of an emotional cost for that. So it's like, okay, I'm only going to press the shutter when I know I've got something on here. So you don't press that shutter until you're certain that you've got the photograph. And that is something I think it's being lost today in photography. So you wait for the peak of expression. You wait for that cloud to be just in the right spot before you shoot. You compose all the way to the edges, so that way you don't have to crop and lose quality later on. You know? So when I transition into high resolution systems, you know, especially like with this Lumix, this is an amazing camera. And I realized the danger really isn't image quality. It was the temptation to just just go away and start hammering away at the shutter and just, you know, it's really easy. Just put the thing on 20 frames a second, hold the button down, and let the camera do the work. But that doesn't teach you anything, and it's a little too automatic. So if you're kind of feeling a little burned out with your photography, or your images are starting to feel sterile, I want to challenge you to try 3 specific constraints on your next walk. You know, if you just take your camera with you and go walking, or your next actual photo shoot. It doesn't cost you anything to do, and it works on any camera system regardless of what you're shooting on. The first thing I would do is turn off your continuous drive mode. Switch to single shot. No bursts, no safety nets. Force yourself to predict the moment rather than just reacting to it. And if you miss the shot, just let it go. The discipline of hunting for the one correct exposure or frame that's just the way you want it, it just changes your flow. And it also forces you back into the present moment. So limit yourself to like 24 frames in a photo shoot. So let's say if you're going to go on a photo walk or on vacation or something, say I'm only going to shoot 24 frames and that's it, nothing else. And commit to staying within that boundary. Now the second thing is stop letting matrix or evaluative metering average out the world for you. The camera wants everything to be like a clean, safe middle gray. It's what every camera system is trying to do is basically create an 18% gray. Now, of course, there are modes in here that will recognize face. It'll put a bias on the person's face so you have a little better exposure there, for example. But really the drama of a photograph, I feel, lives in the extremes. Very, very deep shadows or really bright highlights where it's blown out. Blowing out the highlights to me is not terribly bad if that's what your intention is, because it makes the person not look there. As far as there's no information, there's nothing to see here. And the same thing goes for shadows. Shadows to me is more of a mystery, while just a bright blown out area is just basically you're telling the viewer of that photograph there's nothing worth viewing in this area. So it depends on your point of view, but that's kind of how I've always taken it. So decide manually what you want to look dark within that image. So look at your scene, pick your shadow or your highlight. Where do you want this to be? And expose for the story you're trying to tell, not the histogram or not the safety margin of where your raw file is. The third thing, compose all the way to the corners of your viewfinder before you commit to the photograph. So don't just center your subject and figure, I'll balance the composition later in Capture One or Lightroom. Treat the edges of your frame as like a physical wall. If it doesn't belong in the story that you're trying to show, step to the left, step to the right, move back and forth physically until what you don't want in there is gone. Now, that's a little easier with zoom lenses. In fact, that's another reason why when you're training yourself in this method, go with a prime, because there's no flexibility in the optical range. It makes you work a little harder as a photographer to find that right image. And that's why, I've always enjoyed working with primes, though when I'm traveling and doing other things, I typically take zooms because it's a space and weight savings typically. So that's why I travel with them. But if I had my choice, I would do primes and primes only. But a lot of times that's just not feasible. So that's a really important part of this. So I think what this comes down to is that photography is not a race to see who can accumulate the most flawless files in a hard drive. It's an exercise in observation. The joy just isn't in the final print. It's in the quiet, deliberate choice to stop, look how light hits the surface of your subject, whatever it is, and to document with an intention, to something that creates fulfillment for you, and many times too your client. So the one thing I do, or want to challenge you on, is the next time you pick up your camera, try turning off all the assists, shoot in manual mode, slow it down, see what happens when you take control back from the machine. I'm curious, what's one constraint you can put on your workflow to keep photography fulfilling for you? Let me know in the comments below, and go play in the shadows.